I want to welcome Nili Gilbert. She is co-founder and portfolio manager at Materin Capital Management. Nili also chairs the $65 million David Rockefeller Fund Investment Committee, where she manages the fund's relationship with investment consultants, manager selection, and asset allocation. Nili, great to speak with you. Mission-related investments can mean different things to different people and certainly change over time as well. Explain what mission-related investments means to the David Rockefeller Fund right now. What does it look like right now when we're in the middle of a public health crisis, an economic crisis, and a moment of reckoning for racial justice?
Hi, Scarlet. Well, first of all, thanks again for having me back on your show. You're right. Right now, we're facing so many crises in areas that philanthropies like the David Rockefeller Fund are focused on, that mission-related investing becomes extremely important as a partner to the traditional grant making, where foundations are allocating 5% of their capital to mission-aligned causes each year. When we turn to mission-related investing, we have the chance to think about how we're putting the other 95% of the capital to work behind these very urgent and challenging goals, so that essentially we're leveraging all of our assets towards the types of changes that we want to see in the world.
Now, we've seen how climate change has an outsized impact on minority communities, lower income communities. How does the David Rockefeller Fund address that?
Thank you for bringing this up, because oftentimes we think about climate change perhaps as being a problem that's relegated to scientists. Oftentimes, a lot of the voices that we have traditionally tended to see speaking out on climate have been the voices primarily of white people. But at the end of the day, it's the poorest people and primarily people of color who are disproportionately affected by climate, as well as other broad social and environmental causes. And so the way that we think about this at the David Rockefeller Fund is wanting to deepen down more into understanding what true systemic change will look like. When you look at the protests going on around the country for Black Lives Matter, some of the talk is about police reform, criminal justice issues, but at the end of the day, it's about going underneath the surface to understand all of the systems that are running our society and the impacts that they're having on all of our people. And one of the systems that is particularly important in driving outcomes when it comes to racial justice, also when it comes to climate change and climate justice, which is at the intersection of those goals, is understanding how capitalism itself is contributing to and perpetuating some of these issues. So if we really want to walk the walk behind our mission, we need to take a look not just at our grant making, but at our investment portfolio to make sure that it's aligned with the future that we want to be in.
That's really well said. At the same time, I wonder if you can talk to us a little bit about the broader role of philanthropy, because we're at a time where public budgets are under a lot of strain, and I worry that we rely on private foundations to do a lot of the heavy lifting. When that happens, it turns the task of creating economic opportunities for everyone into a niche pursuit rather than a public mission. To me, it feels like it absolves the government from having to do too much. How do you address that? How do you think about that?
Well, you know, one critique that has come up, not just about philanthropy, but about the private sector, is that, as you say, these sectors have had to step forward, the sense that there is a vacuum of leadership, quite frankly, coming from the public sector, the government, which traditionally has done a lot of the work on broad social issues, the issues of the commons. But at the end of the day, the way that I see it is that the opportunities ahead of us are so great, the challenges ahead of us are also so great, that it's not a matter of which individual sector is going to step up and lead, but what can we all do? And importantly, how can we work together towards common goals?
Right, understood. Now, I mentioned that, of course, you are chair of the David Rockefeller Fund Investment Committee, and that means that you oversee overall asset allocation. When it comes to ESG-type investments, there is no standard benchmark. There's no Standard & Poor's 500 index. How do you measure your performance then? What do you measure it against? Is it to outperform the S&P 500, or are you willing to sacrifice some return in order to adhere to specific mandates?
We believe that we will gain returns from the ESG integration that we've put in place across our portfolio at the David Rockefeller Fund. We are fully mission aligned in our investments, with the exception of U.S. Treasuries. And so we don't see it as a give up. We see it as an opportunity. When we look at our benchmarks, we actually use custom benchmarks that reflect those ESG goals. For example, we are a fossil-free investor, and so when we're looking at our equity portfolio, we'll look at the MSCI ACWI X Energy as the benchmark itself. One thing to think about benchmarks, if you're an ESG investor, is in a way the benchmarks themselves are dirty. Right? The benchmarks themselves are built upon certain systems that we're trying to change. And so to beat a benchmark that is, from the philosophical perspective of your organization, broken in some senses, is, in our opinion, an inappropriate hurdle, because you'll be bending over backwards to move towards something that is in your past.
Right.
What we want to do is be looking at those opportunities that are in the future and understanding how we're capturing those.
All right, Nili, we only have about 30, 40 seconds here. Speaking of the future, I know you want to highlight one organization, the HipHop Caucus. What does it do so well?
Well, the HipHop Caucus is a great organization that is a grantee of the David Rockefeller Fund that's working at the intersection of racial justice and climate change, that climate justice work, and highlighting the voices of young leaders. The last thing that I'm pleased to announce with you on air today is that the David Rockefeller Fund has also just joined the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance, which is an alliance of about $5 trillion of assets across 28 asset owners around the world.
Right.
We are the first foundation to join, and we hope to encourage others to consider this as well.
Nili Gilbert doing good work as, of course, the head of the chair of the investment committee at the David Rockefeller Fund, and also she is the co-founder and portfolio manager at Capital Management.